Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is episode 6 going out on November 19th, 2018. My very special guest today is Joanna Penn. I'm really excited about this because I've been a big fan of hers for a good long time. She is a keenly successful thriller author, and you may also know her through the Creative Penn, where she dispenses advice, tips, and knowledge to independent authors through her website, through her blog, through a fantastic podcast. Believe me, there is no one who knows more about the world of books and marketing than she does. And today she's going to talk about content-based marketing, how you can market your work more effectively. But first, let's talk about the latest news. I have 3 news items I want to talk about. First comes from David Gaughran. I hope you know David through his blog or his book, Amazon Decoded. He's a terrifically knowledgeable person when it comes to decoding the mystery that is Amazon. And while I'm talking about that, let me just say he's going to be a featured presenter next year at WriterCon, the annual writers conference we put on in Oklahoma City over Labor Day weekend. Anyway, he is the Amazon decoding guru, and what he's detected is a trend, a change in the way Amazon on its book pages handles both Amazon ads and what he calls the also bots. You may have noticed this change too. The also bots are the part of the book page where it says customers who bought this also bought that. And of course, as a Red Sneaker writer, what you really want is for your book to turn up as one of those awful also bots, not awful bots, also bots, preferably on a page that's related to your book. Like if you're writing thrillers, you want to be an also bot on Lee Child's page. And as David has discussed in the past, there are ways of gaming that, checking it, and trying to make that happen. The value may be diminishing though, because as I had noticed, I just didn't know what was going on, and David's brought to the forefront, those also bots have been moved in some cases to a position way lower down at the bottom of the page, just above the reviews, or in some cases it's been gone altogether. What's going on? Well, it's hard to know for sure, but in most cases, where that strip of also bots used to be, it's been replaced by Amazon ads. That is, advertising that someone, the author, the publisher, someone is paying for. It would appear that Amazon is trying to drive people toward placing ads, maybe less gaming the system or categories and whatnot, instead putting money on the line and paying for advertising, which of course makes sound economic sense. I've used Amazon ads in the past, as I've mentioned, and I think if you do it right and you have the right search terms that you're using, it can be very effective. And you'll notice in the later interview that Joanna Penn mentions Amazon ads as an important part of her toolbox as well. Maybe even more so. Maybe in the future it's time to stop worrying about some of the other stuff and start putting the money down on Amazon ads. Certainly that appears to be what Amazon wants you to do. Second news item, and this one comes from Mike Shatzkin, who you may know from his website or blog, The Shatzkin Files. He's noted a trend in the Big 5 publishing houses eliminating imprints. And by imprints, we mean the different divisions, the names large publishing houses publish under. In the past, that's been used primarily to give sort of the illusion in the bookstore that there are more publishing houses than there really are, because people may not all recognize that Crown and Vintage are all divisions of Random House. They just look like different publishing houses, but they're not. Of course, brick-and-mortar bookstores are dominated, or have been in the past, by the big five New York publishers. So what have they been doing? What are we talking about? Well, Penguin Random House went first. They collapsed their Crown imprint into the Random House imprint, not the publishing house itself. Sometimes people call that Little Random. And about a week later, Simon & Schuster did much the same thing. They folded their Touchstone imprint into Atria and Gallery. Well, what's the point of this? If it served a purpose, why are they changing that? Mike thinks, and I suspect he's right, or I wouldn't be reporting this, that it has to do with the change in how books are read and how books are sold. Once upon a time, of course, people were buying books primarily in bookstores and primarily books on paper. But today, a huge chunk of the books that people are buying and reading are digital, not printed, and more than half of the books consumers buy are not being bought in brick-and-mortar bookstores. They're being bought online. Given that, it's possible that the need for all these imprints may be disappearing. Now the books can be delivered without keeping a big inventory on hand because of print on demand, which even the big five use extensively. They don't need as much sales force to sell books online. They don't need the warehouse. Of course, now it's possible for individuals or small companies to publish books and to compete online, which of course they do. And that may be what's making the difference. When people are buying books online, there are exceptions like those of us who are in the know, but for the most part, I don't think people really notice the publishing house so much. I think people notice the book description, the author's name, and the price, certainly. But the publisher, that's just a line buried in a big squib of data about the book that is very easily skipped over as you're skimming or scrolling quickly from the book description to the reviews. No one notices so much, and this may be a tacit recognition of the fact, even in the big five, that the publishing world is changing. One last note. I'll join a large chorus of voices mourning the loss of Stan Lee, who passed away a few days ago at age of 95. Stan Lee was, of course, the guru behind the renaissance of Marvel Comics. First a comic company, now a huge movie franchise enterprise. What I want you to remember is that even before the movies, there were books. And first and foremost, Stan Lee was a writer, just like all of us. The other thing that I want to point out is that Stan Lee had been at the company, first called Timely, then Atlas, before it became Marvel. He'd been there for 22 years before he created anything memorable. To be fair, when he first came on board, he was basically the office gopher, fetching coffee for Jack Kirby and whatnot, but it was 22 years before he created the Fantastic Four, his first big hit. And then soon thereafter, he created Spider-Man, which was made even a bigger impact on the culture of the 60s. And pretty soon, the House of Marvel was born. He's credited with creating 280 characters, including virtually everyone that you've seen in those Marvel movies. That's why he keeps having cameos. At least at one point, it was reported that he had written into the movie contracts, the requirement that he appear, however briefly, in any movie featuring a character he'd created. And so far, that's been all of them. Other thing to point out. Yeah, it took him 22 years before he got to his best characters. He largely retired from writing in the late 70s and became more of a figurehead promoter for Marvel. And it was 30 plus years after he created most of those characters before he was really properly appreciated. If he had passed in the late 70s, would there have been a big New York Times obituary for this comic book writer? I doubt it. What's the takeaway for red sneaker writers? I bet you already know. Be patient. Don't get frustrated. It's not going to happen overnight. It never does. That's all right. Be patient. Eventually, you'll have the right book in the right place at the right time, And that's when you have your first publishing success. And the other lesson, keep writing. Don't expect that Lifetime Achievement Award the next day. It's probably not going to happen. Just be patient, keep writing, and don't quit. I had the chance to meet Joanna Penn this year at the Novelists Inc. convention in Florida. What a terrific person. Of course, I've been listening to her podcast for a very long time. She's done more than 400 episodes of it. And I'm happy to say that this is one of those wonderful times when the person live and right there is just as wonderful as you thought they'd be when you were reading and listening to them. She's full of energy, full of positivity, and full of really great advice. As I already mentioned, she's got the Creative Penn, that's with 2 N's, like her last name. That's her webpage. She does a regular blog. She does a regular podcast. She has all kinds of courses, marketing, webinars, many of them completely free of charge. All you've got to do is turn in your email address and sign up. And believe me, you couldn't have a better friend, a better advisor. Of course, I think the Red Sneaker programs are terrific too. But if you want something to add to your toolbox, the Creative Penn is where you want to go. So in this interview, we talked about content-based marketing, which she is an absolute expert on. Here's what she had to say. Joanna, thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Bill. It's great to be here.
Among the many things that you have serious expertise on, I've heard you speak, and I know you've done programs about content-based marketing. What is content-based marketing?
Okay, well, I think the main thing is it's attraction marketing. So it's putting out content, and that could be blogging or articles. It could be video. It could be a podcast like this. This is content marketing. We're doing something that people will find useful. We might be entertaining, but other people do entertaining content. They might be inspired. So you're basically serving an audience with some content in a format, whichever format is preferable. And that format or that content attracts them to your other work. So it's basically something that you put out there for free that brings people who might enjoy your work into your ecosystem. And I've been podcasting for 10 years, and a lot of people have found my books through coming to my podcast and then my website and that type of thing. So that's it in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. You know, the traditional wisdom has always been whenever a publicist or whoever is trying to book me or somebody else for, say, a television interview, they always say, well, nonfiction we can deal with, but a novelist, what are we going to talk about? And I'm sure people are feeling the same thing here, you know, content-based. Well, that's easy for a nonfiction book, but how does a novelist or fiction writer do that?
Right. Well, you definitely have to be inventive. But the great thing is we are inventive because we're fiction writers. So.
Right. We have to be.
Yeah, we have to be. So the main thing is to think about several different aspects of your book. So the first thing might be the themes of your book. So, for example, you write legal thrillers, right? So you have legal books. Yeah.
Right.
So, for example, if you think that your target market might be interested in legal things, you might be, for example, I read a blog about intellectual property law because I'm really interested in intellectual property. Again, we're authors. We have to be interested in intellectual property.
No choice.
Yeah, no choice. But that might be one angle. Another angle might be setting. And this is something that I do a lot. So you're in Oklahoma. I've never been to Oklahoma. I'm in Bath.
What?
Terrible.
I've been to Bath. What's the deal?
Well, so Bath in the UK obviously has a lot of history. And one of my books, Map of Shadows, opens in Bath. And so I've written content marketing around like the sort of unusual side of Bath that resonates with the occult and druids and ancient Rome and curses and all of that sort of underlying interesting stuff about Bath. It's kind of strange and unusual Bath. So if people are looking for, if they're coming to the area and they want to do more than just the average tourist, they might find my article and then they might find